It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague and right hand with programs this year. Eric Slaybaugh is going to introduce today's speaker.
I really want to thank our amazing team of day chairs for the extraordinary list of programs that they put together so far this year. We set out this year to ensure that we had a number of the key leaders impacting our region at both the local and the global level. We've heard about Amazon's development strategies, the culture of UPS, and the direction of the Gates Foundation. We heard from 3 of our region's largest employers with presentations from General Lanza at Joint Base Lewis McChord, Admiral Ruth for Naval Region Northwest, and Boeing's and Beth's John Wojcik. We learned the importance of our seawall, how to perform CPR, and the importance of being prepared for the big one. We had both a tiger and a shark to lunch, thanks to the Burke Museum and Kevin Harrington. We examined the stability and future of banking in our state, held the first joint fire department awards ceremony, and learned how to make Seattle an increasingly relevant metropolis. A central point to nearly every one of our presentations this year, though, is the relevance of the Port of Seattle. From SeaTac Airport's role in being our region's welcome mat for the first-time visitor to Seattle, to the economic impact of our maritime industries, from shipping to cruise ships, one person heads up one of our most relevant regional resources. An Iron Man, Ted Fick, is a Tacoma native, and he spent a good deal of his life working in the Puget Sound, starting with his work at Fick Foundry in Tacoma. Yes, it's a family business. Ted, if your father is anything like mine, I suspect your time at PACCAR might have been a little easier and more rewarding than working for your family. Yeah. He did spend a good deal of time at PACCAR in executive leadership roles. Ted has worked and led organizations with greater than 2,000 employees. He is a strategist who embraces the port's role as an economic driver in our region and its value to develop our economic growth. Here to present on Seattle at a Crossroads, the port's drive for regional prosperity, CEO of the Port of Seattle, Mr. Ted Fick.
Thank you, Eric. There's nothing I like talking more about than the Port of Seattle. We've got a lot going on from the airport to the seaport and throughout the state. I guess I can sum it up with business is booming. We're setting records in nearly every corner of the port. We're acting quickly to capitalize on that prosperity throughout the entire region. So, excuse me. Last week, you heard from former Governor Gregoire on how Seattle can become a global metropolis. In addition to the private sector initiatives that she spoke to, we believe that the public sector also plays a key role. We're responsible for nearly 250,000 jobs that are generated through port's activities, and our mission is one of being an economic engine to the region. When I got here almost 2 years ago, I was pleased to find that we had a strategic plan that mapped out our roadmap for success. It was an easy one. Ted, just come and create 100,000 new jobs for the region. Now, it's a 25-year plan, but after having looked at the talent that we have at the Port of Seattle, the economic prosperity of this region, I quickly came to realize that we would really be doing a disservice to the region if we took 25 years to accomplish that. Now was our time. And we've put the Port of Seattle on a dramatic growth path. We believe that we can accomplish that objective and the entire Century Agenda objective within 10 years. So we're going after it. Plus, I probably won't be working there 25 years from now, and I'd like to see that come home. So generating family wage jobs, realizing those economic benefits sooner is the mantra. In the Century Agenda, there's 4 key strategies that I want to call out because they're part of a theme. One is to enhance the region as an international logistics hub. Another is to advance tourism, promote small business growth and workforce development, and all at the same time by protecting and enhancing the environment. So, how do we go about this? We have 4 lines of business at the Port of Seattle. The first one is a brand new company. It's called the Northwest Seaport Alliance. It's a joint venture with the Port of Tacoma, where we each own 50% of this new company. We have staffed the Seaport Alliance, and we are no longer competing with Tacoma, but we are in the process of clawing back the market share that we've lost to Prince Rupert, Vancouver, the California ports, and the new widening of the Panama Canal and the impact that that'll invariably have on West Coast container cargo. It's a smart way to compete better for this gateway, which now with Tacoma creates the 3rd largest container cargo gateway in the United States. This is a big deal. It's a game changer, and already our exports this year are up 15% over last year at this time. So we're starting to get some traction. Let's shift to the airport. This is a dramatic growth story. You're going to hear from our aviation director, Lance Little, who we brought in January, this August, when he addresses this group, and we'll talk specifically about some of the actions that we're taking at SeaTac. But I'm going to give you a nice overview today. We are the fastest growing U.S. large hub airport for the last 2 years in a row, and this year is about to become the 3rd year. The average airport is growing at about 3 to 3.5% a year. Last year was a big year for airports. They grew about 5%. We grew 12.9%. Five years ago, our passenger volume was about 30 million. This year we'll hit 46. So we're stressing the system here. This will be our 5th record. Last year was our 5th record year in a row. This will be the 6th record year in a row. We've had an 80% increase in international air service. We put together an FAA master plan to get to 66 million passengers. It was supposed to be a 20-year plan. At this rate of growth, it'll be on our doorstep within 6 or 7 years. So we're already behind. So one of the things that I need your help with today is this new FAA master plan we call the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, and the support in the community that we're going to need from leaders like yourselves to get this done. Otherwise, we'll become a choke point for the region's growth, and we just can't afford to let that happen. So let me share with you some of the things that we're doing right now ahead of that FAA master plan that we'll file at the end of this year. Alaska has the North Concourse. We're investing $550 million into this facility to add 8 new gates, to add 180,000 square feet, a beautiful 13,000 square foot boardroom, club room for Alaska in the new North Concourse, and we will be breaking ground on that later this year. But in addition to the infrastructure things that I'm going to talk about today, we also have this other business called air cargo. People think of our airport as moving a lot of passengers through, but we also have a very strong Century Agenda objective to triple the volume of air cargo that comes through our airport. And while we have a tremendous amount of imports, we also have a tremendous amount of export. Today I'm going to focus a little bit on the export, where products like cherries don't go through the seaport or by container cargo, but they go through the airport. And the June and July season, will be a total crush on the airport to move cherries over to Asia. I'm going to talk about TSA wait lines here in a little more detail. Lance will talk more about that in August. But managing growth at the airport, as I mentioned earlier, has really stressed our systems from baggage to gates to just all of the infrastructure demands that we have on on the airport, but one of which is in the news a lot right now are the TSA wait lines. You're hearing about it nationwide. We brought Peter Neffinger, the new administrator, in about 6 weeks ago to have a frank conversation, quite frankly, because in his conference calls, when he said there won't be any more staff, there won't be any overtime, and we're not going to make any apologies for long wait lines, we couldn't accept that. So we brought him in, and we rolled up our sleeves and worked together on what we could do with the constraints that Congress had laid down for him. He had a predecessor that firmly believed that a third of all Americans will sign up for TSA PreCheck, pay $80 for the privilege of not having to take off their jacket, and it just didn't happen. But at the same time, his predecessor signed up for cutting 2,000 TSA agents out of the budget every year, and Congress was more than happy to do that. So with a biannual budgeting process, we're in a little bit of a box. So we hired 90 temporary contractors to help with screening. We looked at the jobs, used lean processes from the private sector that we thought could make a difference. We looked at the jobs that weren't high security, helping people disrobe, re-robe, moving bins around. It made a difference. You were hearing about the over 2-hour wait times at peak. Last Thursday and Friday, we had 57,000 passengers at our airport each day, record numbers for this year. Our wait times with these new 90 contractors who were spending their first week there, our wait time at peak was no more than 23 minutes. Yeah. So, I talk about putting points on the board. That's what we're talking about, is getting results and doing it with speed. And so, those are just some of the innovations that we're taking. We're approved for 10 dogs, and the dogs are great because once a dog clears you can move right over into a pre-check line because you're no longer a threat with an accelerant. We're just now looking for a weapon, and the metal detector or X-ray detector will catch that for us. So, we're approved for 10 dogs. We only have 5. Neffinger's promised to pull 1 out of Portland and 1 out of Phoenix and put 3 more in school, and so things like that will help us. And that's kind of working within the chalk lines of what we have to work with. We have 33 lanes at the airport, but as you've seen, we only ever have about 18 of them open. So what the 90 contractors allowed us to do was to move those TSA agents to open up more lanes. So now we have about 24 lanes open, and that's how we're able to bring those wait times or security lines down to 23 minutes. Our goal, long term, is to get to no more than 20 minutes at peak for a security wait line. So this is an old graph because it's already a week old, and you could see that our maximum wait time at 1 o'clock, or 1,300 hours, was 75 minutes. And that was a big improvement over a few weeks before that when we had spring break and the crush on us. So we're going after this. We're trying to do something about it. And I think we're making some great inroads with what we have to work with. Okay, the Airport Sustainable Master Plan. This is our plan. About every 20 years, an airport goes through an FAA master plan, and it's kind of architecting a plan for infrastructure for the growth of an airport. This is an artist rendering of the new international arrival facility. I mentioned earlier our international flights were up 80%, and one of the reasons for that is Delta's arrival here in town. They've gone from 45 flights a day. This year they'll hit 150 flights a day, and they plan to go well past that number into the mid-200s per day, but not until this facility is completed. Today we have an international arrival facility that's 40 years old. It can handle 1,200 passengers at peak, but we have 1,800 passengers arriving at peak. What that means is you get to sit on an airplane after 14 hours and wait for the International Arrival Hall to clear so that we have some place to put you. Not a great welcoming to our fantastic city. So we're doing something about it. We'll have shovels in the ground before year end, and this new facility, a $608 million facility, will be completed by the end of 2019. We also continue to have new air service coming. Xiamen Airlines just announced new air service from Shenzhen and Xiamen, China, starting in September. Volaris just now announced new air service from Guadalajara, a Mexico City-based airline. So in addition to the airport master plan, We also have a very vibrant tourism business. Tourism is a high priority for us. We're taking a more regional approach. This year we architected and launched a new tourism grant program. I funded it with $100,000 its first year. We were able to support 13 different proposals out of the 60 or so proposals that came forward. And so from Ballard to Mount Rainier to Walla Walla, we're able to fund some really cool ideas about how to generate more tourism that invariably will have passengers coming through our airport and taking in the region. Our cruise industry is another one of those very strong businesses. 15 years ago, 16 years ago, it did not exist. We launched this around 1999, 2000, and today is the strongest cruise business on the West Coast. We will hit 960,000 passengers this year, almost 1 million passengers. It'll be an all-time record year. We operate 2 cruise terminals in downtown Seattle, one at Pier 66 and one at Terminal 9091. We're trying to promote a cruise and stay program that encourages passengers to come in a few days early, stay a few days after their cruise, take in the region, and have recently announced a public-private partnership with Norwegian Cruise Lines, which anchors them to Pier 66 in downtown with a $30 million renovation that we split 50-50, and it's the first time they've ever invested a dime in a port's hometown cruise facilities. So we got them to commit to split the cost with us and to sign a 15-year lease, which was historic for us. They had always kind of worked us, every 1 to 3 years with a little competitive process. So a great inroad for us. Big impact economically. Every cruise ship call, and we'll have 203 this year, brings about $2.5 million of economic impact to the region. Our Century Agenda goal is to double the economic value of cruise. Fisherman's Terminal. This is a facility that the port has managed for over 100 years. It is the home port to the North Pacific Fishing Fleet, which provides 40% of this nation's seafood catch brought right out of Alaska and down here to Fisherman's Terminal. Our goal is to double the economic value of fishing in the maritime cluster. In addition to that, many of these boats are ready to be replaced, recapitalized, and we're working very hard with the private sector to ensure that those boats are built and financed right here in Seattle and not in Norway or Florida. So working on keeping that maritime industry vibrant with the recapitalization of our fishing fleet. Our Economic Development Division has a number of initiatives, one of which is Small Business Incubator Accelerator. And this is something that from the airport with dining and retail to small businesses in manufacturing, aviation, aerospace, is a high priority for us. This dovetails very nicely with the whole workforce development initiative that has caused us to really take stock in meeting with the union presidents about the fact that we have a lot of people retiring out of the trades, whether it's electrician, plumber, welder, construction worker, and so we're doubling down in the area of workforce development to be able to fund apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, and expose more people to the port and the businesses that the port touches. In fact, this year we've tripled the amount of paid high school internships. We have over 100 kids working at the Port of Seattle this summer in high school programs to introduce them to the port's business earlier and consider that as a career. Our real estate division is also a key cornerstone of our economic development division. We're the second largest landowner in King County, and I've challenged our new economic development director, Dave McFadden, to have a shovel in the ground on every undeveloped acre of land we own within the next 24 months. I want to use real estate as a strategic tool to attract businesses to the region and to keep and retain those businesses that need to grow and need room and space to grow into. We're also able to use real estate to collaborate with the 39 cities across King County. There's a lot of real estate that we own that needs to be developed, but there's also real estate that we don't own that maybe we ought to own. And so we're working with communities like Des Moines, and I would just want to tell you a little story here about, in my outreach and meeting with all 39 mayors in King County, we talked to the mayor of Des Moines, talked about what some of his objectives were, and he mentioned how he was 85% residential. He wanted to have a stronger tax base with more commercial presence. Well, we owned 85 acres in Des Moines, Washington. So he said, how about if we team up? The FAA is looking to build a regional headquarters somewhere in this area and go after that proposal. And so you fast-track the permitting, the port will find a competent general contractor. Together we went after that. We secured that business. Next week we're having a groundbreaking ceremony, and 1,600 people are going to start reporting to work in Des Moines, Washington. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So they'll be pulling people out of Alaska and out of California and bringing them here to Des Moines, Washington to come to work. That's a 3-phase project that'll result in about 3,500 new jobs for that community. And that's going off in several other communities as well, where we own property and we're able to collaborate with local communities. Okay, this is a topic on everybody's mind. We all hate traffic, right? Well, the port's trying to do something about it. We're working collaboratively with our partners like the City of Seattle, and we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure throughout King County. It's one of the reasons why we work so hard against the arena proposal down in Soto. We just feel that the risk of economic progress in an already overly congested freight corridor was just too high. We've got a lot of very good paying maritime jobs that are at risk, and we didn't think that swapping $75,000 a year jobs for $15 an hour jobs was a good trade-off. Not opposed to an NBA or NHL team. We just think that we need to be very mindful and thoughtful about where that location is for that new arena. And then finally, I'd like to talk about our environmental commitment. I don't think there's an organization in this room that invests more in the environment than the Port of Seattle. And not because we have to, but because we can. We have a very successful port that returns 100% of its net income back to the community every year, whether it's taking down bond debt, investing in workforce development, or in the environment. And we have a number of projects that we kick off every year with the goal of keeping our environmental footprint smaller over the course of the next 20 years as part of our Century Agenda objective. And it's things like aviation biofuels that could result in emissions being reduced by 80% of jet fuel, reducing carbon emissions, protecting water quality, and restoring habitat. Finally, when I came to the port a couple of years ago, I found a very, very heavily siloed organization that needed to break down some of the barriers that were keeping us from being as effective as we could be. I was worried very much about our capacity to capitalize on all the opportunities we had and to work with much greater speed of delivery, whether it's a project, an infrastructure project at the airport, or taking advantage of some of the real estate opportunities that we had throughout the region. And so we've worked very hard on creating centers of expertise, putting up a matrix organization where the business presidents can leverage the brain trust of the port across the port and not duplicating or triplicating the functional disciplines within the Port of Seattle. So in summary, the port's business supports the regional economy. We are an economic engine. We support family wage jobs, and we're driving for regional prosperity. Thank you very much. I'm told I have time for a couple of questions if there are any from the audience.
All right, question over here.
Ted, you talked about the $608 million international terminal. How have you resolved the apprehension or reluctance of the airlines whose only passengers are domestic to pay for that?
Great question. First thing I want to make sure everybody's aware of, the taxpayers in King County do not pay for any of the improvements at the airport. Those are all paid for by passenger facility charges. The airlines, our tenants at the airport, pay for 100% of the investments at the airport as well as FAA grants. So we all recognize that an international arrival facility is key to the region and key to the gateway, and we are putting together a plan of finance that will allow us to not be the highest in any rate basket of charges. And we think that that brings the most equity to the airlines at the airport. There are a variety of different fees that the airlines pay. There's an FIS fee for this Federal Inspection Center. There's a passenger facility charge. There are a variety of other fees that we assess on airlines. And we think that ensuring that we're not above the market on any one of those categories is probably the right mix so that we don't discourage international travel from coming to our airport. We think we need this facility. We've tried to be very cost conscious, and we've put together a new progressive design build manufacturing process which should speed up the delivery and contain costs for us. But you know, it's one of those calls where we're not going to please all the people all the time. We know we need to do it for Seattle, and we've tried to put together a plan of finance that we feel is equitable.
I have a question over here.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. You know, I think it was just a year ago that hundreds of kayaks were out in the middle of Elliott Bay having to do with the shell, I believe it was the Polar Pioneer.
Yes.
Quite a controversy between the city of Seattle and the port and Foss Maritime. In reflection, how would you have done that differently? And the rift between the city and the port with regard to that type of maintenance at the Port of Seattle?
That's a great question. I draw a very fine line between the battles that we choose to fight. I really don't enjoy arm wrestling with the city over every little issue and try and pick our battles very carefully. But I think judging cargo on its political merits is a very slippery slope. Next time it'll be Nike shoes or corn syrup, adding to the obesity of America. I mean, it's just, it's a very, very sensitive area to go. And so, you know, we need to have a great relationship with the city. We've got a lot of things that we can do together to make this a great region. And we're not going to agree on everything. But I believe that we had an opportunity to have done more public outreach and to have vetted that. We allowed ourselves to be painted into a corner by the Shell board as to we were under non-disclosure agreement, and then all of a sudden we had 10 days to either decide whether we're going to do it here or they're going to go to Dutch Harbor. We needed the interim use revenue. It was beautiful for us because we had the capacity, it was good margin, it was legal, and it created 700 new jobs. And so the economic test seemed to make a lot of sense. The blowback from the community was one that, as a new private sector leader, I totally misjudged, and that's on me. So you asked the question. I think to have not have been bullied into making a quick decision and to have had more public outreach was my lesson learned on this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much for speaking with us today. What is the port's overall budget and what percentage of it is paid by tax dollars, number one? And then number two, what are the challenges that you see 5 years out? You've got a lot of things moving forward, but what are the big thing that keeps you awake at night?
Great question. So this year, we'll have $582 million of revenue and about $250 million of net income. We assess $72 million a year in property taxes. That's down from last year, was 73 million, and a few years ago it was about 76 million. So we've been taking that down. That's not to say that it won't ever go up. We have the authority to levy about $100 million a year in property taxes. The biggest challenge that I see is our speed of delivery. We have a very strong environment. I don't want in any way for the port to be a choke point. We came out of the recession as a region much stronger than most other parts of the country. And these projects take a long time to deliver, whether it's real estate projects, airport infrastructure projects, cruise terminal projects. And I need to get this team functioning at a high-performing level so that we can have speed of delivery. It just can't take 6 months to cut a purchase order. It can't take as long as it takes in this process. And we imposed a lot of management controls after the audit in 2008, some of which were not compliance related, but they were just there to ensure that that never happened again. And so we're trying to get a good grasp of what can we replace our rules-based culture with process with to be able to move forward and to be able to deliver the solutions that this region needs that'll bring us those 100,000 jobs. So I worry about the speed at which we can move.
Over here.
Yes, I'd like to know what your plan for Occidental, that alley called Occidental is, and how and what your long-term plan for transporting that cargo from the port out to the freeway and beyond all the other choke points are. Thanks.
Thank you. This is a complex question because the Northwest Seaport Alliance is, to a large degree, controlling the ball on how container cargo gets moved from Terminal 25, 30, 46, 18, and 5, and being put on a truck or on a train and moving north, south, or east of here. One of the things that we're getting ready to move on is a Lander Street overpass to have a grade separation between the street level and the rail tracks and truck and car traffic. So a Lander Street overpass, possibly a whole gate, are some infrastructure things that we think we can get behind and work with the city and the federal government and the state to help solve. But we've got to be able to get cargo moving from the terminals onto trucks and trains quickly and efficiently, and it just can't take longer to move something from the boat to east of King County than it does from east of King County to Chicago. And that's what we've got today. And so you drop another 1 million cars on top of that already overly congested freight corridor, and we'll start to lose the maritime jobs. And we've already lost 900 out of 1,800 maritime jobs. Those are $75,000 a year jobs. And we're going to lose the rest of them if we don't do something about this. So we think this whole gate, Lander, is one solution for that. And we'll just continue to, we've recently invested with the city of Seattle in a heavy haul corridor, which will also help us with selected routes where we can have heavier trucks move product from the ship to warehouses so that it can be broken down and put on trains or sent on trucks to move to their final markets.
Could you tell us a little more about the agreement between Seattle and Tacoma? Sometimes agreements are easier to make than to implement.
I got to tell you, for over 50 years, people have been talking about this idea of joining Tacoma and Seattle and getting out of the knife fight that we've been in. In the past, if the region needed, I'd say 6 deep water terminals, we'd go build 4 and Tacoma would build 4, and there you are with too much capacity, and then we're taking pricing down to the bottom. So this is a 20-year agreement, and it requires the vote of at least 3 commissioners from the Tacoma side and 3 commissioners from the Seattle side to approve investments and measures going forward. Each home port still owns the real estate, and it's part of the home port, but the Northwest Seaport Alliance acts as a terminal operator, if you will. They're the face to the customer, so there's one pricing level. They manage the terminals. They decide what freight and what shipping lines go into what terminals, and return the profits from that business back to the home ports each year.
One comment and a question. The comment is, even though I respect the point of view that we need to get an MBA team at all costs, I personally supported your point of view. The second question, which may be out of your realm of expertise, but I've been reading a lot about the TSA, including reading that we're paying a lot of money and not getting much protection. Like they miss 60% of the guns that go through. Is there any talk of fundamentally restructuring the TSA?
Boy, that's above my pay grade. The prior administrator was very focused on metrics and pushing people through to the point where weapons were getting through the system. And that's a problem. You really don't have a secure airport network if that happens. So Peter Neffinger is adamant about protecting and securing the airport system. That's resulted in longer lines. The airlines have started charging for bags. That has caused more people to carry bags on. That requires more time to check. And so, we've looked at privatizing security, which is an option. San Francisco does not use the TSA. They have privatized security. It's one alternative that we're looking at. Another is to exhaust every effort possible to work with the TSA. More dogs, they're very efficient. Helping people get signed up for pre-check, to be able to have digital displays that tell you which checkpoint lines are moving quicker than others, pathfinders and wayfinders. Some of these temporary workers that we've brought in to help people robe and disrobe and move bins around so that more of the TSA agents can spend more time opening up more lanes and more checkpoints. And we're starting to see some results of that. So we're not giving up on the TSA. I'm not quite sure if our experience, well, I know our experience here in Seattle is not being felt around the country. And hopefully they'll take stock of what we're doing here in Seattle and use that as some lessons learned to help improve their own operations. I do believe Congress needs to act on the dramatic budget cuts that they've experienced with the reduction of agents. Yes, they do. So that's about $3.5 million out of our budget this year, and that really only gets us through the Thanksgiving crush. So.
Thank you very much. This has been very interesting. I'm over here.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine. You've touched on some of the major challenges coming up, Panama Canal, Canadian ports, et cetera, and some of our challenges, as well as tying in with Tacoma Port. How do you see us moving forward to be more competitive then, in addition to transportation? Are there ways that we can be better than the Canadian ones or more enticing than going through the canal?
That's a really good question. We have this thing called the harbor maintenance tax. If you're not familiar with it, the federal government has assessed $100 to $150 per container tax on every container that comes off of a ship at a U.S. port. And the intent of that fund was to be able to provide maintenance funds for ports that needed dredging and other maintenance. Well, we have naturally deep water ports here. Most of that money goes to the Gulf. We don't see any of that money back. But it creates a competitive disadvantage with the Canadian ports because they dodge that tax. The tax never gets charged when the container crosses the border eventually after they rail it across their country and drop it down into Minneapolis or Chicago or into Kansas City where the end market is for most of the cargo that comes through our gateway. So that's a tall challenge to overcome in an industry that's got a lot of excess capacity and has been under a lot of pricing pressure. For example, a container used to cost $1,150 to go from Asia to America. Now it's $650. So that came out of somebody's margin. And that's just the oversupply in this industry. So we have to have a very elegant supply chain solution. We have to have a very reliable supply chain. And that's why I'm so concerned about freight mobility and our ability to have a reliable service level to the shipping customers that really don't need to use our gateway. We have what's called discretionary cargo coming into this gateway. Its end market is not here. Unlike Los Angeles, where 70% of the cargo that comes into the LA region is consumed there. Only 30% of what comes into this region gets consumed in this area. The other 70% goes on to the Midwest. So we have to have a very competitive solution, and so things like getting Terminal 5 big ship ready is important. Helping Tacoma get Terminal 3 and 4 big ship ready is important because as a matter of productivity, these shipping companies are building larger and larger ships, and if you can't accommodate them, they'll just pass you by. So those are some of the things that we're doing. We're working with our congressional delegation to address the harbor maintenance tax distortion that it creates for ports that are near the border. New York, New Jersey has this problem. Boston has this problem. To some degree, the California ports would have the problem if they didn't have so much of the freight consumed right there in their region. Great question. Okay.
Lake Shuswap, British Columbia, 1997, was the last of our annual houseboat vacations. We found the perfect spot to anchor at the end of a long channel, the entrance of a popular cove. A few nights in, we were not buying the forecast for strong winds. It was clear and still. Within what felt like minutes, 60-mile-an-hour gales were crashing 9-foot waves over the roof of our houseboat. The next 3 hours were surreal. Dawn found us beached 20 feet onto shore with a foot of water in the galley. Gratefully, no injuries, well, except for my father's sunken ski boat. As the only houseboat on the cove with power, we shook off the loss and launched a pancake feed for cove evacuees. Soon, vacation levity returned. Stewarding a gateway calls for agile footing, timely triage, and the disposition of a gracious host. See you next week.